Good morning. Valiant Productions is always really good at picking like my jams. That's totally, yep, that's how I feel every time I start a new project. Oops, I did it again. Jenny Q said it really well. People a lot of times are like, how do you do it all? Like, I do a lot of things. I like to dabble and experience things in life, and I do feel like I'm out of my mind a lot of the time. And then I realized a few years ago, especially because of my improv training, that like that's why I do it. Like, if you can get out of your mind, you can achieve huge things, right? So we talked, the stuff yesterday was great. All of these speakers are so amazing. And Laura actually made me think of something earlier in her talk with the fortune cookie thing. Because like a lot of things get really crazy in life sometimes, right? And some of you that were here yesterday know that, yeah, oh, she's a comedian, but she cries an awful lot. It's real awkward. But now that you know, most of you know, and then those of you that don't know that I cry a lot, and it's guaranteed within the next 15 minutes, so hopefully you have your tissues. But, so life is hard. Like, sometimes people are like, man, she's always upbeat, and I just, in my whole life, I've always kind of felt like the person that people want to confide in, they want to, like, spill their guts to, because I sort of am like a silver lining type of a person. I, like, try to look for the positivity. And I used to think, man, I'm really optimistic a lot of the time, except for when life sucks. But I keep that in here, and I process the feelings. I let myself feel all the feelings, because we need to do that. And then I still like to try to move forward, because all of the like worst situations I've gotten myself into, or the hardest trials I've been exposed to, those are the things that like the biggest blessings come from. Look, it's already starting. So I shared with you guys last night just some other challenges right now that I'm going through, and I'm realizing that at the same time as the really hard stuff happens, that's when I see the most potential within myself, and I start to see how valuable it is when we share our true stories with other people, because everyone else is going through something. It may not be the exact same thing, but we're all dealing with stuff. We all have these hopes and ambitions of things we want to do and become. So in the world of improv, the core of improv is yes and. And yes means you take whatever you're given, you take whatever the suggestion is from the audience, or you take whatever task you're assigned at work, you take whatever thing is presented to you and you say yes. You acknowledge what it is that you have to deal with, and you add to it. You take that yes and you build on it with your own thoughts, ideas, skill set, whatever it is to move something forward. So the reason why improv works as a comedic art form is because when we're playing on stage together, we're yes-anding each other. We don't block and say, nope, that was a dumb idea. Let's just shoot each other down and make each other feel like crap. That works. No. When we yes-and people, we move things forward. You said yes to being here. You got up early on a Saturday morning. You wanted to see what you could learn here, what friendships you could make, business connections. You're yes-anding yourselves by just being here. So yes is a really important word for me. Sometimes so much so that I forget that it's okay to say no. And I also sometimes am so used to trying to give gifts and yes and other people that I don't focus as much on what I can yes and for myself. But after I left the courthouse and I filed for divorce, I went to Panda Express because I was hungry and I hadn't eaten in like a week. And, right? The walnut shrimp stuff is good. And I was like, come on, Panda, give me a good fortune cookie. Do this for me, I need it. So I sit down in this little corner area and I bust it open and it said, say yes. And I started crying in the Panda Express. Shocker. There's Megan, she's crying, she's laughing, we don't know what she's doing, it's crazy. It's a laugh cry. But I taped it to the front of my little journal that I keep all my tasks in to remind myself that I need to say yes. And even in what seemed like a really, well, it doesn't seem like it, it's a really challenging experience. Any of you, I want to be like, hey, where's my divorce people at? Woo! But don't, have to do that. But, because it's hard and it's really not fun, and it carries a lot of strings that need to be re-strung in other ways. But through that, that's one of the yuckiest things I've had to do. And then suddenly I feel the new me. Or I guess the more real me. Because I love to be a goofball, and I love to be the person that people want to confide in. I like to be the person that they're like, Megan is crazy. She's out of her mind. But when I stopped overanalyzing all the reasons I should be doing something, so this applies to my personal life and to any project I've ever done, when you sit there and you're like, I have an idea, or I have a thing I need to accomplish, and then we start thinking too much about it, that's what holds us up. Our brains become our worst enemies sometimes, because we start thinking of worst case scenarios, or what if I fail, or what if people don't like what I am trying to put out there. And I've had a lot of that. In the world of comedy, it's actually surprisingly full of drama, and a lot of people get real mean in that environment, because comedy, for some people, including myself, it's a really therapeutic type of I want to say sport, because for me, I'm like, in competition with myself. But it's an experience that can be very divisive if people want to go straight for the politics, they want to go straight for the hot button things, or just the low-hanging fruit of tons of F-bombs or whatever. There's a way to do comedy that is like, I'm better than you, my opinion's better than you, rah. And then there's a way to do comedy that is like, let's bring humor into the hard stuff and find out how much more we actually have in common. If you're ever watching a comedy show and you're laughing at something, it's either because you relate to it and you get it, you're like, with your buddy, because yeah, you remember when that happened back in college? Yeah. You relate to it. Or in my case, I think some people are like, she is just so weird that I'm glad I'm not that. And that's cool too. But having it be a positive and connecting thing is super important. Shelley mentioned a book that I wrote. And so I wrote that last year, and I read a little bit. For those of you that were here last year, I read some of that. And when I kept thinking, I should write this book, I felt like I needed to. For those of you that don't know, the book called Not My Plan was about a time in high school when I accidentally got pregnant. Oops. And I hid the pregnancy because I was filled with shame. I was afraid that I was going to burden other people. I just didn't want to be a problem. And when I had confided in two of my best friends that I had been misbehaving a teeny bit with my boyfriend at the time, I got reamed. They're like, oh, how could you do that? Well, you're terrible. Whatever, I don't remember. She maybe didn't call me terrible, but I felt that way. So then when I realized I was pregnant, I was like, oh, I'm not telling a soul. And luckily, 90s fashion was in my favor, so I had the baggy, my TCBY uniform was baggy. Somehow I made it all the way till I went into labor without having told any of my close acquaintances or family members. Only the father of the baby knew I was pregnant. And I even slept on the top bunk, sharing a room with my older sister at the time. Ugh, hoisting yourself on a top bunk pregnant is not, just don't do it, guys. But all these years later, I thought, I need to share my story of adoption because it's positive. Mine is such a beautiful, well-rounded scenario, and I know that's not always the case. But when the talk of hot topics, especially in the comedy world, I noticed a lot of divisive conversations between pro-life and pro-choice stuff. And I'm not going to get into that right now, but you can imagine that's a really divided topic. And so oftentimes I would realize that adoption never really came up as a very common discussion point. It was either you keep the baby, you be responsible and keep the baby, and that's the only option, or you terminate the pregnancy. Like, those are the two main talking points. So I kept feeling like, oh, I gotta share this. But I had young children of myself, for myself at the time, and I'm like, I can't write a book, I don't wanna do this, and then I started on it, I was like, okay, we're gonna make this happen. And then I found out I was pregnant again. I'm super fertile, guys. It's just my thing. I am really good at procreation, and so I started working on it, but then I had this deadline. I'm like, oh, I'm pregnant again. I don't want to be dealing with this for very long. So then I had to like buckle down, and some of my other priorities shifted from my other projects, and I just typed to my little heart's content and busted out a book that has stuff, not only my story, but it also brings in some of the stuff from my birth daughter. She wrote a segment, and then her parents, and my mother. And so it shows like this full picture of how it all comes together. And it was crazy. Like, people are like, what are you doing? You're writing a book now? Like, what? And I'm like, I don't know. Just don't think about it so much. So anyway, more on that in a little bit. But think about some of the things that you're trying to accomplish here. I know I saw some of you guys earlier, like, you're 2-dayers, which is awesome. You guys have dedicated this time to be here to improve. A lot of times people ask me about what Women Ignite is. They've seen that I've like been involved for a couple of years. I have no intention of shaking it loose, because when I come here, I always meet these great people. I forge relationships that are long lasting, and then I start to see the way that it affects my business in a positive way. And what drives me crazy is not only sometimes feedback, well, not necessarily feedback from this conference, but when I try to explain to people, they're like, is it just personal development or professional? And I'm like, why is that two different things? Did you ask that too? You're like, no, I'm just kidding. You're like, I need more professional tips. The thing is, when you work on yourself, you become a better human, and then as a chain reaction, you will be better at business and relationships. It's a fact. So I do comedy for a living, and sometimes I find myself wanting to just smash my head against a wall, because people are like, having a comedy event with our company doesn't fall in line with our corporate mission. I'm like, your mission doesn't include happy humans? I'm sorry, what is wrong with you? And I'll try. It's a really tough sell, and it's really frustrating, especially when I go in with the corporate training with the improv. People just don't get it. They don't understand how playing and how interacting with people and bringing it down to those basic human connection skills is so important to a quality organization that delivers amazing products and services. People like ICCU get it, and that's not just even an intentional sponsor plug, but the way that they even go through their hiring process, and some of the stuff I've learned, and people that I used to work with in other things in the past who have all flocked to ICCU. Company culture is a real thing. But if you don't take the time to start with yourself, what are you going to be able to contribute to other people? And in improv, all we do, we play and we try to just get people to let their guard down. When I first started improv, it was 12 years ago. My older brother invited me to come to do improv. And I was like, I don't know what that means. He's like, just trust me, I'm in this troupe and we need another girl. And I could tell he didn't want to ask me because it was like his thing. And he didn't want his little sister to come, or whatever. So I show up in this house in a cul-de-sac on a Saturday morning, and there's like 12 to 15 people, grown adults, in this living room, and all the furniture had been pushed to the side, and they were just playing games. They were just goofing around, doing these little short scene games and these gimmicky activities. And I was like, what is this? Because I remembered as a child, I played a lot. I still try to as an adult, but I get made fun of much more than I did as a child with a wild imagination. But I remember those feelings of being able to create and being encouraged as a child to be creative, to play, to laugh. Like, that's what we need to do as humans, and then somewhere we lose it as we grow up. But I suddenly found that in this living room, and people laughing, and these activities that were making you just say the first thing that comes to mind without getting in your head. It's like, you don't want to overthink stuff. It's very off the cuff. And then I realized that, first of all, I needed to keep that in my life forever. And as a branch manager at the time of a different bank that was seized by FDIC during the recession, that's a different story. But I was a branch manager at the time. I was like, loans and checking accounts, blah. But I loved the people. And I realized that these activities that I was playing in were helping me to be more present in the moment. I was listening to people better. I was listening to actually hear what they were saying. I wasn't waiting to be like, I'm ready to speak back. I got something to say. I'm ready. I was more engaged, and I was realizing that I could give them gifts and make them look good by hearing people's ideas, looking for ways to give them a win by saying yes to something that they've contributed. My branches were often top production branches. I want a trip to Hawaii one year is what I'm saying, guys. Because happy employees write more loans. Anyway. But there was a different vibe in my office, and I had very low turnover because people wanted to come to work. It didn't matter what we were selling. We were having fun. And we were getting out of the daily mindset of what our job is. Like sometimes we have to go to work, and it's like, filling out the paperwork or whatever our job entails is not always fun, but if we enjoy where we're going and we know that we are appreciated as humans and we're validated, it makes a really big difference. So that's the key, is like getting people out of your minds. How many of you guys like really enjoy laughing? Anybody in here by show of hands enjoy it? You love that little kiss of relief to your soul as you exhale a chortle. Me too. I love it. I love it more than crying, but only slightly. Because crying feels so good sometimes. And laughing and crying at the same time is, so good. But you gotta get out of your mind. Some people they don't get it. So a couple of weeks ago, I got to do a workshop at another women's conference, and there was like 80 people crammed in this tiny room. I had no idea how many people were gonna show up, and I was doing improv activities with them. And of course, afterwards, I read all of the surveys, right? Because I gotta read the surveys. They're anonymous, which I hate, because I wanna track them down. But out of the like 80-something, they were all like amazing and glowing, and I was like, yay, it works, because all we were talking about was like the human connection stuff. We're just like having fun, we're leaving judgment at the door, we're participating fully, all these things we should be doing in real life, but in these like fun, high energy ways that help us experience it and see how easy it really can be. And then I came across one survey with all caps handwriting, all caps, that said, I don't see how this applies. Okay. That's obviously the one that sticks with me, guys, because I want so badly to find that person and grab them by the neck collar of their whatever Banana Republic suit they're probably wearing. Listen to me, you are part of the problem. But even amidst all that, so it's like, people get it, most people get it, that, yeah, I didn't give them, you're gonna leave here with work, things A, B, and C. You're gonna leave here with these actionable items. No, you're gonna leave here, if you choose to participate fully, if you choose to quit overthinking things and judging other people and judging yourselves, you can leave here like a tiny bit better than you walked in the door. And that's as simple as it is. We need to stop roadblocking ourselves with the thoughts that we have of why we can't do things and whatever else. And then we need to just exist as better humans bit by bit. Yeah, I'm taking that little smattering of applause back there.